Hey guys, Stealth here. In this deck review, I'm creating a deck, or I'm looking at a deck that I've already created specifically for this map. This map is a maze in Japan, and a maze it is. You can see that it has all sorts of different roads connecting all zones. Delta is a large zone that is not connected by any road, or at least not really. It's only going by this sector, and there is a lot of very mountainous terrain here, without a lot of cover. There's just hills with some trees on top of them, but these valleys here are completely devoid of cover. You got the occasional spots of tree line here and there, but that's it. Last time I played on this deck, or on this map, it wasn't very good. So I had to create a deck specifically geared towards very heavy infantry warfare to make sure that I could operate in these middle zones: Echo, Delta, Juliet and Charlie. For that, a motorized deck turned out to be best. I thought about going mechanized, but mechanized vehicles like IFVs and the likes might not be the best, because they're usually not as mobile as the units that I would like to have. So instead I went with Scandinavian Motorized. Now I updated this deck to make sure that it contains the new units from DLC 3 beta, and that means that I get access to some very nice gear. Everything around this deck is built around infantry warfare and making sure that everything is very mobile. I do not want anything to be flying, but I want high mobility vehicles. So stuff that can get my infantry to the front line and through terrain, preferably off-road, very quickly. For that I got a couple of command infantry coming in an XA180. I could go with the XA180NO. The difference is some armor. It would be worth it, but I don't want to get these guys shot at anyway. Whereas some of the infantry that's being transported in the XA186NO might take some fire because they're closer to the front line. I intentionally went with commando infantry or command infantry because they are much more easy to hide. And vehicles, while some of them do have some stealth rating, most of them is poor. These guys at least have good stealth, so it's going to be pretty hard to find them in all of those cover and tree lines. I got one fob to make sure I can resupply my guys, an Amphibil 101, also known as the Stalwart when you're using Britain. These guys are there, which also have high off-road capability. I don't think that any better off-road transports have been introduced. Maybe the Scania, which goes 70 kph off-road. Let's see, the Unimog Cargo is a 50 kph, and the LOGK, same deal, 50 kph. So the only thing I'm going to change here, which I hadn't done yet, is change the Amphibil 101 out and get the Scania in, because it has slightly better off-road speed. If I want to resupply a position further out, I'm going to use the HKP-4A, and with this helicopter I have 1,000 units of supplies. Very quick, but helicopter warfare or helicopter operations in those mountains are not easy. Infantry is where the real punching power of this deck is, and that's not something that I usually say. For a motorized deck it's much more the case, much more so than normal, because the motorized units or the motorized decks really rely on infantry that can be quickly deployed into breaches in the enemy lines. So that's what I'm doing here. And the first cards I'm using, and keep in mind that this is a low point tactical game deck specifically designed for that map, so I'm also going to have most of my units upvetted as high as they can be. So I got 10 RBS 90s with the veteran availability. That means that I got 5 per card, very nice range on them, 55% accuracy base, and add a couple of veterancy points from the veteran tab, accuracy points from the veteran tab. And that means that they are pretty much always going to hit. Then some RBS 56, which unfortunately is the only anti-tank unit that's available. The range on these things is terrible, 2275, but they really serve a purpose here. The reason I have them in this deck is because you don't usually have an engagement of 2275 meters when you're in a forest. When you're on top of one of those hills, the more likely range is to be about 2 kilometers, where if you have better recon than the enemy has, you can kill some vehicles, disable some tanks, stuff like that. They're being transported by the TGB M42, mostly because I ran out of these XA180s. So these guys are not as mobile as the XA180s, but they're still okay. They got a 70 kph off-road speed. Their autonomy though is only 400, so don't expect these things to go across the map and back because they don't have the fuel to do that. Next up is the FSK, and these are some of the best infantry that my deck has to offer. They got the Erics, they got some nice weapon systems in the form of the LMG3 and the C7. They're very quick, 30 kph, they got elite training, and with the Erics they can take down some vehicles at a 1000 meter range, which is something that is pretty much the normal engagement range when you're doing close quarter fighting. If you don't want the FSK, you could go with some other units which also carry the Erics, or maybe you could go with the FKP, which are also an interesting choice. They got the Carl Gustav M3 over the Erics, but I think that the Carl Gustav would also be a great choice here. I'm transporting these guys again in XA186NO, so the slightly heavily armored version of the 180. They are also extremely mobile. You can see that they have an off-road speed of 100 and an autonomy of 800, which is huge for a land-based vehicle. You don't get that many which can do that. Next up, Kustjäger 90, 15-man squad in case I'm dealing with a lot of infantry. They also got 12 anti-tank weapons. Ground range is okay, accuracy is not stellar, but the AP power is huge. And keep in mind that these guys are at elite. That means that they have the best accuracy bonuses in the game. And I think that this accuracy is more likely to be around 60, maybe up to 70% even. They're also capable anti-infantry force with both their saw and their assault rifle. And they're a 15-man squad, so they're slightly harder to kill than the standard squads. Other units I'm using here are the Fallschirmjäger 90. They are pretty similar, if not a complete copy of the FSK. The difference is that the Fallschirmjäger 90 are a 15-man squad, and they carry slightly more ammo of the Erics. The reason I have the FSK is because they do have, I think, slightly better anti-infantry capability. Let's see. Now these guys are elite. And these guys have been reduced to shock troopers in beta 3. So I suppose you could go with more Fallschirmjäger now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, let's do that instead. So I'm going to delete the FSKs, get Fallschirmjäger 90s in, and get another 10 points or 10 units of those. And finally, I got some Stormers in the XA186NO again. These guys are mostly, I'm not going to call filling material, but and I'm seeing that I put these guys at veteran. I'm going to call those at elite as well. They are cheaper infantry. They are not as expensive as the Fallschirmjäger, which I can call in for 45 points. These are 35 points. Also in the XA186. They got 6 Carl Gustav M2 weapons, so they can do quite a bit of damage to vehicles and tanks if they can get close enough, because the ground range is only 700. Support-wise, everything has to be geared against mobility as well. So the RBS 90s that got introduced in the DLC 3 beta are a very, very nice addition. 80 kph off-road speed. You can hide these things pretty well, and they can get out once they fired a couple of shots very nicely. Great range against helicopters, 2800 meters. I haven't used these things yet when I was playing on a maze in Japan, because the infantry was capable of taking down everything that I needed to get taken down. But when you're doing faster pushes, you want to get a couple of these in. Next are the LVKV 90s. Again, I believe these were introduced in DLC 3. I'm not entirely sure about that. Radar guided SPOGs, 60% accuracy, great range against helicopters. And you could have these guys double roll as an IFV, because for 50 points with 4 frontal armor and a great ground range and some AP power, don't skip over that, they are very capable of defeating both lighter vehicles and infantry as well. M125 mortar carriers, you don't get a large selection. You got the M125. Now that I'm seeing I got the NM106, I'm going to go with these guys because they got a bit more ground range. So I'm going to delete those. And mortars don't really need to be accurate, so 7 is enough. A couple of NASAMs, which are anti-air units. They are long range, or suppose you could say medium range anti-air units. They carry MRAMs, which I believe is the only unit that carries MRAMs which is not a flying unit, so it's not an airplane. They're radar guided, so seat susceptible, keep that in mind. But their accuracy is great, and I'm using 4 of these at hardened, so they do also get some more accuracy bonuses. I don't think they have fired in my game because they couldn't get a good line of fire, but they are nice to have, especially because they're very mobile. And on a map like that, a maze in Japan, you want to get that additional mobility. Then the NM45, just some jeeps, or I suppose you could say flatback trucks. Good ground speed of 90 kph with the Oerlikon 20. Mostly as a backup for the RBS 90s, non-radar guided, can also engage infantry. Tank wise, got the SGRV 103B tanks. Not really anything to be mentioning about these, it's mostly because I can have some tanks that I have these. Leopard 1A1NO, standard Leopard tanks, and the Leopard 1A5 NO2. So again, some Leopards, because these are the most mobile tanks that you can get. Got a lot of reconnaissance, but mostly double units. I got some M41 DK1s, because these guys are very mobile, have a good optics, medium stealth even, and an okay gun. It's not stellar, it does 50% accuracy, 10 AP power, so it's well enough. Then I got the Cayuse, which is definitely a capable helicopter. You don't get anything better than this, or at least not in the motorized section, because I'm looking at the optics and these guys may be a little bit faster, but I believe that the Cayuse is slightly less expensive. These guys are 45 pointers versus 55. Then I got 10 Marine Jaeger, because I want to have a lot of passive spotting ability, and they can even snipe some stuff if they wanted to. This is one of the maps where that sniping is actually viable. Got 10 of those, carried by the XA180. I know that normally I don't use reconnaissance like this, not bound by chopper. But the reason for that is that choppers are pretty easy to get shot down in this map, so I don't want to bring them in a Bell 204. I do want to get them in an XA180 because it is almost as mobile as a Bell, and its autonomy is a good deal greater. Some Wildcats to make sure I got some autocannons in there. I don't really have a lot, and you don't get a lot because it's a motorized deck, so these guys are a nice addition. And then 14 Volscom Jäger. Looking at this now, I can think that 10 of them should be enough. These guys are 5-man squads, but they're quite effective. They're not very expensive, only 20 points plus a 20-point helicopter, so the helicopter really is the more expensive thing here. You could go with the TGB M42, but I think that this is okay, because these guys are pretty fast, 25 kph. I can march into their target and be done with it. Vehicle-wise, got some M92 PNMKs with more autocannons, because I want to have that autocannon fire. Recoilless rifles with 30% accuracy and some AP power. It's not great, but they're only 10 points. And they are extremely mobile, 90 kph, so you can do some nice ambushes with these units. And if you're faced with anything that has more armor, you could bring in some TOW 2s, so that's why I have those in. Then for more fire support for the infantry, I got the IKV 105, which has some armor, not a lot, but they're only 35 points, and you get these things mostly for their gun. They're RH 105-2, or 11, I'm not sure what it says there. I use these guys to support infantry at decent ranges, so they have slightly more anti-vehicle capability, because these things fire faster generally than ATGMs, and that means that they're more likely to hit their target. Helicopter wise, I got a couple of Fennecs. I haven't used them yet, and I doubt I ever will, but it's nice to have a couple of Fennecs standing by. And then air wise, I got one Gripen, because it's a low point tactical game. I want these things to be at their top performance. One F-16 MLU ATGM/AA plane, they can do both. Also went with one of these instead of 2 rookies because I want to get the additional accuracy here. 2 Fighting Falcons with 1000 kilogram bombs, so I can bomb some stuff. And then some FAA Puffs if I want to do some seed missions. They're not the best seaplanes, but they're decent for 70 points. So that's the deck I used for my map in Amazing Japan. Let me know if you see anything that could be done differently or better here. Also, I have a gameplay video of this deck up already. Link to that is in the description down below. If you like this deck, the deck code is also in the description, so you can copy this and see how the deck works for you. But if you don't like infantry warfare and you're more of a tank person, please at all costs avoid Amazing Japan, because it's a hell for tanks. With that, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video. And like the video, of course, if you enjoyed watching this deck review of Amazing Japan map. Thanks for watching. See you next video.